I move to open the meeting of the Marshfield Conservation Commission on January 4th, 2022. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 6:00.
Did everyone have a chance to read the 12:21 minutes?
Yep.
And do you have any edits, Phil?
Yeah, I do. Bert brought up some comments, and I paraphrased your answers, Bert, on page 6 regarding the current revised Chapter 505 and what did not conform. You'd asked that question. And Rick said that if that would have replied that the 8-foot platform would have been the only thing. So I paraphrased what you gave to me, put it in. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything that
Nope.
not already come to Bill's attention? Okay, then. I move that we vote to approve the 12:21:21 minutes as edited. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
I'm
Thank you.
abstaining, Bill, because I wasn't here on the 21st.
Okay, so I'm gonna get a 501 on that, even though she didn't ask for the 1. Okay, gotcha. 501, and that would be Susan. Okay, that's what I used to do. Okay.
Okay, and I will point out that we are continuing to offer a hybrid meeting here in person and on Zoom. In the event that any technological problems arise and Zoom is unavailable, this meeting will continue here in person. And I want to share with everyone some sad news for us, but good news for him. Our conservation agent, Eric Flint, will be leaving us in mid-January for a really good opportunity in another part of the state. So I want to extend a heartfelt thanks to Eric. I think on behalf of all of us, you've done a terrific job for us. We are happy for you, and we're really sad to see you go.
Yes.
So,
Thanks, Craig. Much
No
appreciated.
longer will you have to sweat out construction on barrier beaches, coastal dunes.
Yep.
You'll be upland. You'll be
Oh,
lucky
but
to
now-
find. You'll be
now
lucky
he's
to
got-
find a vernal pool.
now he's got to deal with stormwater. They have different regs out there.
So can I chime in a little bit?
Sure, please
Eric,
do.
I just want to thank you for coming on and being a strong force in this position. When we first started this out, the position was not established. We fought to get this. It took a long time. Mike Moresco helped us make it happen, the former chair in the HR. So when you stepped in, it was great. So we had a lot going on. The regs were there. We had a bunch of different projects. You and I have been in and out of every form of wetland resource area and the regulations and seen it all. So it's been a short but pretty incredible experience for me personally, and I want to thank you for doing your part. The commission wanted to get me some time and everything, and you clearly made that happen, and I'm grateful to you. I did not have the opportunity to take a solid 3 days together for vacation until somebody like you came along, so I'm grateful.
Thanks, Bill. And I would just say from my end that, I'd like to thank all of you for the past 10 months that we've spent working together. It's been a really great experience for me. I really, hadn't had much experience with the town of Marshfield prior to coming here, so it's been a really rewarding experience for me over the past 10 months, and I've definitely learned a lot, and I will miss you guys too, but I'm also excited to be moving on to the next stage for me.
If you want to go to the beach, you know where we are.
Yeah, I'll come by your house, Rick.
Or
You
the
know where
river.
you can park, yeah. Okay. I am rearranging the agenda as published. We are going to take business items 1 through 3, and then the one request for certificate of compliance, and then we will leave business items 4 through 6. I'll do 1 through 3 and B7, excuse me. We will take business items 4 through 6 at the end of the meeting to hopefully have the participation of Andrew Sullivan, the building commissioner. Stuart. I'm looking at Sullivan on the screen. Sorry.
Something I would do, Craig.
If I see it, that's what I say. Okay. Business item 1 is a de minimis activity at 53 Ice House Lane for hazardous tree removal. Do either Eric or Bill have any comment on this, or?
No, this was just one tree that fell during the storm, and the down portion of it is still on the yard. A portion of it is still standing, and then another tree is now leaning closer, so it's just hazardous tree removal.
Okay. I vote that we ratify a de minimis activity for hazardous tree removal at 53 Ice House Lane. May I have a second?
Second?
All in favor? Aye. And next de minimis is 315 Oak Street, an Eversource gas connection. This is to install a gas connection on the existing driveway outside of the 75-foot buffer to a bordering vegetative wetland. I move that we vote to ratify a de minimis activity for a gas connection installation at 315 Oak Street. May I have a second?
Second?
All in favor? Item B2, Green Harbor Golf Course, SE 422913. De minimis activity versus an amended order of conditions. This work involves the installation of a buried propane tank. Would, Eric, would you like to amplify?
Yeah, sure. So we got this both through the building department and the fire department for various permits on their end. Basically, they're looking to install a 320-gallon underground propane storage tank, and that will serve a fire pit that's immediately adjacent to it. If you look at the site plan, you can see it overlaid on the plan that we approved for the Green Harbor Golf Course improvements earlier this year, or last year. The fire pit itself looks like it's kind of just within the 50, and the propane tank is kind of between the 50 and 100. The current area there is a putting green, and this is before us because this was not included on the originally approved plans that the commission reviewed. We did get, we do have a section regarding underground storage tanks in the Chapter 505 regulations, but that only pertains to oil or hazardous materials. Bill and I talked to one of the fire, was it the
Tom
fire?
Corbo, the
Tom Corbo,
deputy
yeah.
chief.
And he confirmed for us that they would not consider propane to be a hazardous material. It's in gas form, and they're not concerned about that getting into the soil. So I guess the question here is whether the commission feels this needs additional review under an amended order of conditions, or if it's satisfactory as is.
Any discussion here?
I think it's satisfactory as is.
Yeah, we would have proposed it, I believe.
You okay?
Yeah, okay.
All
It
right.
might be difficult to putt around the fire pit, but
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, I think there's a little redesign of the putting green going on. In that case, I move that we vote to consider the installation of an underground propane tank and fire pit as a de minimis activity. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. How is propane not hazardous?
It's a gas, and what happens is when it gets free, according to Tom, it gets trapped in the interstitial space. It's a pain in the neck to get out, but it dissipates over time, so it's not considered hazardous. And he's the second fire professional I talked to in town that's verified that.
Hazardous to the groundwater.
Right, okay.
Hazardous to the air.
Hazardous to, yeah, okay.
You're right.
Item B3, 176 Beach Street. De minimis activity versus amended order of conditions. This is a shed replacement. Who would like to take this?
I got it. This is that project that many of you know down by, at the end of Beach Street. They had the cutting of the dune, the pool that's gonna be raised up, the gazebo, that one. And so they've actually been doing a really good job on their enforcement order and on their orders in general. And what they want to do is the area in red there is going to be the future location for the shed that they'd like to set up. They have a smaller shed that they'll be tearing down. They're going to be removing concrete and other hardscapes. That's a benefit. And they're building a slightly larger shed. I told them to communicate with the building commissioner because When Andrew was the building inspector at the time, he and I had to deal with their contractor and bring things into order. So we've kind of stayed tight on this the whole way through. So they went down, and I provided you with Andrew's feedback, so I feel pretty good that this is following the rules and regulations of both departments. And I think we could probably consider this to be a de minimis activity. The only thing I want to say is this, is that when you were talking about the pool in the beginning, they wanted a very large pool house that got smaller and smaller until it was eliminated. This is going to quasi-function like that for people to change, remove their sandals, keep pool equipment. It's low-key. They aren't looking at anything elaborate. Could it expand? Yeah, but then they'll be dealing with Andrew and I again because they know the rules.
Okay. Anyone have any comments?
Nope.
Building commissioner is fine with it as is. In that case, I move that we vote to consider the shed replacement and removal of impervious surfaces as a de minimis activity. May I have a second?
Second.
Joe?
All in favor? Aye.
Okay. Alrighty. You have a COC and B7.
Well, let's go to B7.
And then all those continuations.
We'll go in order except for the 4, 5, and 6.
Okay.
B7 is a discussion of work at 326 Careswell Street. And I think, Eric, you have been working on this?
Yeah, so Maria gave me a call earlier in December. She currently lives at 3 Chilmark Lane here and was purchasing 326 Careswell behind her house. And she was proactively reaching out because prior to the sale of the house, they had gone in and done some clearing to do a survey of the property, not too unlike what we saw over at 987 Ocean Street, but at a much smaller scale in this case. So basically, there was the same thing that we saw in the other location, which is basically these tracts of land that were cleared out of mostly brush and vines and looks like some small trees, and basically, unearthed a lot of the property back here. So it's pretty much a T-shaped pathway leading from the backyard into what is the property boundary, which is kind of demarcated by a stone wall. Right on the other side of that stone wall, there is a wetland, according to Mass GIS, and also based on the plants that I was able to see while I was out there. So this work most likely occurred within the buffer zone only, not within the wetland itself. But basically, Maria was trying to do the right thing and reached out to try and make sure that, as she acquired this property, that, she was doing the right thing with conservation in order to move forward, and just had some kind of general questions about what the commission would like to see in terms of, either mitigation or a solution to the cutting that occurred here, and then maybe also general questions about what she can do on the lot. One of the things that I had suggested at the time would be, just placing conservation markers, maybe 50 feet up gradient of the rock wall, serving as kind of a do not disturb past here section. But I guess I'll leave the discussion and what to do up to the commission.
Can you indicate on the map there where the cutting in the pictures?
It actually roughly follows this path right here, the 100-foot buffer.
Goes straight back?
Yeah, there's a small shed right about here, and that's kind of the edge of existing yard. And then it just looks like it was a mess of brush and trees. There's also large brush piles because they cleared it and then also just left it there. So I think getting it out is something that she was interested in doing. My advice at the time was just to wait until this meeting, just so we could get everything figured out in one go.
Were the neighbors dumping material in there?
No, just thank you. Well recap, and he was excellent. I called him in the morning and he came, within 2 hours, knowing that it was like December 8th, and we actually have closed. It was December 14th that we closed on the property, and because it's so close, I was like, geez, as they were backhoeing, because that's what they did, and then creating these big piles. It was never touched probably for 50 years. The property's 1965, the house is like a tear down, that's something else. But to the extent that we wanted to add privacy to our backyard, because it's a beautiful landscape, that these big brush piles also have like PVC pipes in them, you know, some like residue over time, would probably be the best word. And I want to dispose of it properly and then have it grow back as is for privacy. Both myself and our neighbors love having privacy behind our yards. So, I mean, the goal is it 50 feet, is the stone wall, the buffer, and then literally have some markings that we know, future people know. The fact that the property, we need to look at that too, and the compliance of the town, what that looks like is an absolute tear down. The house hasn't even been touched, we're rotting the whole thing. That's down the road. But I wanna make it right, and then just clear the big, they're probably 6 foot high, just to get rid of it.
How would you access that? You have to access it from Cariswell Street?
I think we would ask that, yes, there's a driveway to the right side of the house, so, Eric, you're right, go back with your little pointer there, go straight back with that, right there is a driveway.
Okay.
You know, go right back there, and it continues that they must have had a driveway there before, and then their, what do you call it, shed that's on a slab is closer to our property, so it's on the, that shed is, our property to the left of it. So they just went straight back and T-bowed it to look at the stakes of the property and left the residue in the brush. And they're great people, it's an estate sale too, that's the other reason that, great people, nice people, I didn't wanna have them, I don't think they have the money just to deal with that, so I said, we'll take care of it.
So you don't intend to do any construction or anything
Not
anytime
at the
soon?
moment, no, no.
Just want to clean the brush out.
Right, yes,
And
yes.
did they mark the property lines? Are you aware
Yep,
of where the
yep,
lines are?
Yep, we have that,
Because,
there's
on-
big stakes.
On two sides there is Concom land, correct, Eric?
I believe so, I can pull that up.
Those two lots and then the back area
Yeah.
is all
They were
Concom.
even telling us stories that they were supposed to be buildable back, when our property was built in 95, but they were trying to build on the other side by Eustis Street and started digging in that, and they couldn't because of the wetlands. Some of you may have already known the history of these lots.
Yeah, so it's Concom behind and then also to the side, so it's surrounded by conservation.
Yep.
Anyone else have questions or comments?
Well, the Eric's suggestion of markers, 50 feet off the stone wall would be a good thing.
Is that something you folks would do, or do I do it?
We give you the marker, you come down to down here, town hall, and we'll give you the
Is it
markers.
like the orange, are they orange markers that stakes or something, or?
They're, so we have these
Like-
basically circular red and white wetland resource area do not disturb markers. You would just need to get a couple of 4x4s and put them in the ground and measure out that 50 feet. But we can give you the placards themselves for free, and then they can just stay there.
Awesome,
Yeah.
happy to do it.
So Eric, is 50 feet about at that tree line you can see there?
We can measure it out here.
And that would make our neighbor we share our driveway with happy too. Because when they first started clearing, it's like, oh,
50 feet wouldn't quite go out there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
So how many markers would you,
I think we could just do maybe 3,
3.
2 on the property line and 1 in the middle, 50 feet out.
okay. So do we need a vote on this?
We could ratify with a vote just to make it official if you want, up to you, I think.
Always better. I'm looking at the old minutes, and there are some things I sorely wish that these
there'd been
days
a
that they
vote on.
ratified,
Okay.
so that we would have strength. Yeah.
So I move that we vote to let Mrs. Bonzogny remove the brush piles that are existing there now to allow the property to revegetate, and she will place 3 conservation markers at the 50-foot, 50 feet off the property line.
Second.
And
All-
then, one other question, this is just for my clarity, the properly vegetating means it just should happen naturally versus me planting anything.
If you want, I mean, you could certainly plant if you
Okay.
want it, but
Because I guess there were apple trees back in the day there, so it was,
I think the main thing with the conservation markers is that it's set aside as do not disturb, so you could plant stuff back there, but we just wouldn't want like a landscaped area.
right,
Makes sense.
fair enough.
yeah.
So modifying that for an option to plant down gradient, that I'm hearing, of the 50 in the conservation markers?
Outside of the non-disturbed area.
Up gradient,
Right.
okay.
If they want to put natives.
Yeah, if you've got a
Why not
swath.
put
Could
natives
put
within-
natives in
As an option to put
non-disturbed,
natives
right,
within the 50.
Right.
Let's, what would be.
Be more like
Native
restoration.
plants.
So high bush blueberry, sweet pepper bush.
They had some,
tupelo.
grapes there
Yeah.
and other stuff,
Grape's a
so-
little invasive, it takes over, you know what I mean? It's just, the vines are really, they're not really invasive so much as opportunistic. And then in the summertime, they'll put off monster leaves and they'll basically absorb all the light. And if you get me talking on it, I'll tell you a lot.
That's okay, I
Yeah.
can do this separately, just come and.
They're trying to give you the option to plant native plants down gradient of these markers and up gradient to plant, ornamentals or trees. That's what I heard.
Okay,
Okay.
awesome, terrific, thank you.
Okay. We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. You can stop by and grab the markers anytime.
All right, thank you for your help, he was great, it's like, wow, he did service and.
Don't rub it in, we're losing him.
Sorry.
You'll have to move to Worcester if you want the same service.
Marshfield's better than this.
Thank you.
Other than North Shore, so,
Okay, it is 10 to 7, so Building Commissioner Stewart is not really available yet, so we're going to go on to the COC that we have in front of us. SE 422888 at 67 Norwell Road.
Thanks.
Issued for construction of a new single-family home. The letter from the applicant's engineer states that the project was constructed in substantial compliance with the approved plan and order of conditions. And I'm going to turn it over to Eric, who has been on the site, and I'll let you explain.
Thank you. So there's been a little bit of an update on this one since I sent out the notes late last week. I had a conversation with the applicant's engineer on Monday, and some of the items that I had highlighted, he cleared up. So basically, when I first went out there, I had only seen 1 out of the 3 required conservation land posts that were out here, and there was actually only 1 on the as-built site plan too. But it turns out that they were buried in the brush over here, so Jeff Hassett went out and located them and provided a new plan to us that has the locations of those 2 markers there, and I also checked to see that those were in the field. So the marker requirement has been satisfied. The original proposed plan also called for plantings of sweet pepper bush and sweet fern at the bottom of this slope here. The applicant's representative stated that at the time this was really proposed as an optional planting and not something that was required. It wasn't something that was included in the special conditions, it was something that was just mentioned on the site plan. And I did go back and take a look at the minutes from when this order of conditions was issued, and it was noted at the time that the planting was not for mitigation, and that it was just put within the buffer zone down there. So I guess I can leave that to the commission as to whether or not they feel it should be required since it was on the plan. It seems like it was more of an optional planting. The other biggest concern that I had when I was out on this site was the lack of soil stability at the top of the hill here. I'm going to try and show some pictures that I took while I was out there. It's a very steep slope. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the property, but essentially you can see at the top of the hill here, there's this exposed soil that's been left like that since the construction. It was included in the D2 special conditions that they stabilize the site as soon as possible to avoid erosion. The reason I would be particularly concerned with erosion at this site is just given the steepness of the slope, and that runs down, into the wetland. You still have the silt fencing in place, which is probably good since there's the exposed soil. The silt sock is also in place, and I would note that, the D3 conditions were also to have the conservation administrator come out post-construction to confirm that the erosion control could be removed and then to remove it. That hasn't happened yet, and based on the soil conditions at the top of the hill, I would say that it should probably stay in place there, the erosion control, that is. So basically, that's really the only item that's left outstanding. The other items that I highlighted in the notes before have been cleared up. The applicant's representative, I mentioned this to him, and he did request the possibility of getting a partial COC if the commission were not willing to issue a complete COC, given that the site has yet to be stabilized. And I don't know if the commission wants to do that and issue a partial, and then have to, track down getting that soil stabilized, or if they would be okay with that. So I guess I would leave it to you guys for discussion, and I can answer any questions if you have any.
In that photo, it looks like the silt is escaping
Yeah.
the silt fencing.
Yeah, it does, and it's clumping up at the top of the hill, and you can see it moving down, so it's clearly.
Is the property for sale? I mean,
They're
are they
closing on it right now, that's
they're
why they're
rushing to get
concerned.
the COC
Yeah.
done?
It's under agreement.
Yeah,
So this has turned over twice since we permitted it, I believe. Hassett was in it before, and then who's in it now?
it's, who's the, I don't have the
Different
applicant's name
guy.
right now.
I'm pretty
Yep.
sure, and he's selling it, so that'll be the third person buying it. I also was curious, is that how high all of these conservation markers are?
No, that was the lowest one, but they're basically behind that little stack of,
Yeah.
the little retaining wall at the bottom of the
What occurs to
septic.
me, commissioners, is if they're gonna get lost like this, then maybe setting a height would be a good idea going forward, because, I come around and, we went to, Rick, remember we went to Digan's property, and the North River Commission is this high off the ground, So, anyways, maybe that's something to think about on another property, another time, another place, because he's bumped into these problems a couple times where he can't find markers. So 30 to 40 inches is probably the way to go,
Isn't a COC black and white? Either you got one or you don't? I mean, is there such a thing as a partial COC?
There is, but.
And I'm not partially married to my wife. I'm
So
sorry.
there are partials, but I frown on them in general, but that was good, but we moved right along. So partial, maybe with like subdivision. One of you want to get out of the subdivision and move on, and the subdivision isn't done, we could probably give you a partial, and we have done that in that case, if it's there. There are other things that are large that it might fit in. To give a partial here, you'd have to have some very stern language in order to make it hold. And as commissioners, what's going to end up happening is, your sole conservation staff is now going to have to go after that, find that, and make sure that that gets all done. And otherwise, the teeth you really have in it is at these kind of, high water mark opportunities where lands are converting to somebody else. So I tend to agree with where Rick is, and partials are not something I'd really support in general.
Yeah, I think in this case, it's a bad idea.
I don't like the idea of a partial. And I'm also a lot concerned that this seems to be the second that I remember in as many meetings where we've got insubstantial compliance with the COC and then we come up with a list. I think we should be looking at the applicant's representative to say they certify that it's instead of insubstantial, because they know what the differences are and they're intentionally not telling us.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And that's really disappointing.
I agree.
What about the pad under the propane tank? Did that get captured on a,
That was not captured. I would need to go back to the site plan to see how far back that is. Let me pull that back up.
Is that the tanks you just went past in your pictures there, Art?
Yeah, I was just trying to see where it is in relation. So it is actually probably outside of the 100. So I don't know if it necessarily pertains to us, but it was definitely not noted on the site plan. It is this bad. You can actually see it on the picture here too.
Yeah, so it's just gravel, right?
Yeah, it's just gravel stone base with a little wood frame around where they put the propane tank itself.
Yeah, no, I agree with Joe. We need them to, nobody can read a plan better than they can, and
No
if they're
worry,
coming
no
in here
worry.
with these plans and we're not,
Yeah.
they're not in compliance,
Well, the builder wants to get it closed out, but,
well,
yeah, I
yeah.
think in this case, they need to give it a season and let landscaping come in, so it's, they can just warranty it or something, it's between the builder and the buyer.
Yeah, they can find a way.
The commission can clearly just explain you're missing the following things, deny on this, and let them file again. And it's really about having, as Bert was saying, growing season to get that thing to take. I did this to Greg Morris's father, and he had that stuff done in 3 weeks in the blazing heat. He had it figured out. So it can be done. It can be done. And this absolutely positively needs it because down gradients, multiple wetlands, and all those neighbors are going to become inundated by silt if it doesn't, if we don't get the root system going.
And that's a tough location.
Yeah, and then they're not putting the optional plants, which would have been part of the stabilization, but it wasn't captured because it was optional, But so you're missing grass, you're missing the shrubs, so you're gonna have big time problems there with those elevations.
Well, I think we need to vote to deny this.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And so we want to see the plantings, we want to see stabilization,
Yes.
yeah.
It's not mandatory to do the 2 annual monitoring years, but the plant's gotta be planted at least.
Yeah,
And the grass has to take, and you have to have sprouts and everything showing up. So I think in the letter you sent to them, those are the key things.
So
And-
just to clarify, when we're talking about plantings, are we talking about the sweet pepper bush and sweet fern at the base of the hill that were on the original plan that weren't included in the conditions, or are we talking about getting the top portion of the lot seeded?
I think both, but without annual monitoring, and it's not like, it was optional, but something equivalent. I mean, unless the commission doesn't want the shrubs, that are on the plan, then that's that. I mean, I think if they just plant them and they show up and they die the next month, then that's the way it goes, because we didn't have annual monitoring on this. But we need stabilization of the soil more than we need vegetation, I think that's the key.
So these plants that were on the original plan should go in as part of this. I can include that in the
I
letter.
I would say, personally, yes, I don't know. If people are just gonna put them in and there's no monitoring and they're gonna die, but boy, that
Yeah.
slope is steep and you've already got that silt escaping.
And one of you
That's the
definitely,
other point, they should leave the erosion control in place.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
They
agreed.
should,
You should add it.
they
add
should
more.
address the erosion control and improve it if it's gonna be there for any length of time, because
Yeah,
it
that's another
appears,
element, yeah,
it appears to be failing.
right.
Working.
Yeah, if it fails like that, then all you need is a couple more rainy seasons or days, and it's just gonna gush out.
Yeah,
That's what's gonna happen.
okay,
Sounds good. I'll put that in the letter to the applicant's representative.
thank you. Okay,
You have-
it is
You have all the continuations.
time to do continuations. We have first up, SE 422951, raise and rebuild at 12 Branch Street. The applicant has requested a continuation to January 18th. I move that we vote to continue to January 18th, 2022, public meeting as per written request of the applicant. May I have a second?
Second.
Bert,
All in favor? Aye. SE 422958, 274 Foster Avenue, elevation of a single-family home. The applicant's representative requested a continuation to the January 18th meeting. I move that we vote to continue to the January 18th, 2022 public meeting as per the written request of the applicant's representative. May I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
SE 422960, 202 Moraine Street, the Red Gold Farm subdivision. The applicant's representative requested a continuation to the January 18th, 2022 meeting. I move that we vote to continue to January 18th, 2022 public meeting as per the request of the applicant's representative. May I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And SE 422950, 76 Carolyn Circle, a dock system. Applicant's representative requested a continuation to January 18th. I move that we vote to continue this to January 18th, 2022 public meeting as per the request of the applicant's representative. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And 72 Bay Avenue, SE 422754 amended, additional surfacing under house. The applicant's representative requested a continuation to the January 18th, 2022 meeting. I move that we vote to continue to January 18th, 2022 public meeting as per the request of the applicant's representative. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now we will return to business session B4, a review and possible ratification of Marshfield Forms 6, Notice of Non-Significance.
Right.
Who,
Well, I was just trying to circulate and get Andrew ready, because we timed this for him. I'm good, thank you. All right, then he's good. Well, I wasn't the lead. I don't know if the chair was the lead, or Bill Finn was the lead either,
I'm
or Andrew
going
was the
to
lead.
let Mr. Finn
Okay, Bill Finn was the lead, okay.
present to us.
very generous. The only reason that this is under consideration is because the commission hasn't used this form previously. And so the fact that you haven't adopted it, for it to be available to you to use in the future, you need to adopt it. And that's the purpose of this Form 6.
Can I just add to that? So it hasn't been used since the 80s by this Marshfield Conservation Commission in general. So just to kind of make sure that that's known.
May I ask why it hasn't been
Yeah, why?
used?
We're not exactly sure. There is a lot of very good information. We aren't fortunate to have somebody like Bill with his wealth of decades of experience. And sometimes we just have to deduce it. I could say this, that it looked like it was used at least 13 or 14 times in the 80s, from 81 through 85. And absent just going back and, reading the tea leaves, I'm not exactly sure why it stopped, but it sort of stopped. It's not that it can't be used. It can be used, and other towns have it listed to be used. It's the follow-on to either a Form 4 or a Form, what do you call it? A Form 3. In either case, it's a possibility, and it means that the commission finds whatever activity it is to not be significant to the resource areas and the performance standards for the wetlands values or wetlands interests. That's sort of the nutshell of it. So to kind of give a comprehensive answer, I don't really know why it just stopped.
Why would we use it, Bill?
Well, if you, do you have a copy of the form? Okay, so if you look at the introduction statement on the top of the form, I don't have it in front of me, but it's basically used if you find that after a public hearing, you have to hold a public hearing, but you're not gonna issue an order of conditions, because you don't feel as though the project is gonna be a significant impact on the resource areas, this is a way for you to declare that.
So then they wouldn't do an NOI?
I think you have received an NOI, but you're not gonna issue an order of conditions. You have a public
I
hearing.
got it, I got it.
You get an NOI submitted, you hold a public hearing, you think, well, this is not really gonna have any impact on the resource area in question, or the work in the area is not gonna be significant to the resource area, significantly adversely impact the resource area.
So then you would not approve the NOI, but you would put this in its place?
Form 4.
6.
So you Form 6.
Form 6,
I
but
mean,
wouldn't,
Form 6, yeah. Yeah, Form 6.
That's right.
so there wouldn't be any guidance prior to that until it came to the meeting? There would be,
You would receive.
No one
you
would-
receive an NOI.
right, but no one would tell them that the odds are that this is what would happen? Or we
So
would
like a
just get
due
the
diligence.
NOI, act on it, and then,
I assume that would depend on the situation. I can't tell you.
oh, okay.
It's just, the action that you're taking right now is just to make that form available as a
I got
Marshfield
it.
form as opposed to the
Right.
state.
Who would then say, we should do this rather than the conditions on the order of conditions on the NOI? Who would trigger this
I
action?
think the commission would be your decision.
So it wouldn't be the representative of the person that,
They may ask you, but it's your decision.
so it could be anyone.
It's your call
Got it.
to use that form instead of issuing an order of conditions. You say, well, we don't need an order of conditions, we're not gonna issue an order of conditions. And I think that's what the form says.
Can I ask a question also? Maybe when I was out coughing, I missed this, but why is this different from an RDA? Why wouldn't you do, would this be, someone should have had it seems like an RDA is how you determine whether there's an impact or not. Is this because it's a house perhaps it's in a resource area?
This is in response to 52 Jackson Street,
Well, yes,
which was
that's,
deemed substantial based entirely on interior work,
so those,
which has no impact on,
I guess that's what I was getting at.
so
So they have to file an NOI because it's something it's in a resource area. So I'm just trying to clarify that.
Could I read an excerpt from the MAC handbook about the use of this form, just to maybe clarify a little bit some circumstances where it might be used?
please.
Yes.
So in the MAC handbook, it reads, the Form 6 can be issued in response to an NOI filing in cases where, in some cases, the work proposed will not affect the interest of the Wetlands Protection Act. This is very rare and most often occurs when work is proposed in locations that do not meet the regulatory definition of a resource area, an applicant files by mistake, or a project is modified in a way that removes it from commission jurisdiction. That's basically all it has to say about that.
Not a lot. This would,
So let me ask on that, that's handbook, okay?
Yeah.
You guys know about the Blue Book, the handbook. It was really well written. Great people like Bill Finn, or Andrea Doss and other people were out there writing this piece. So it's a great document, but it's not the regs. So what I heard there was almost, it's not the proactive tool that Art was actually asking about. Hey, am I in a non-significant situation or not? You're rolling the dice with any and all NOIs when you apply, and you're gonna find out whether or not you're a Form 6, because it's non-significant, or you're gonna get a Form 5, which has been the tradition that we've been going down, because we have some significant or cumulative adverse effect that needs to get mitigated with special conditions or some guidance from the commission and for final approval. So it doesn't sound like the 6 necessarily is something that we can use as a proactive tool for the applicants. We don't know what the outcome was going to be.
But I mean, this was in existence before, so I'm just I mean, we can ratify it if everyone agrees, but
Yeah.
hasn't it already been ratified? Isn't this already in existence?
The state provides that form. The town has not adopted it
Oh, I see.
with
Well,
the
maybe
Chapter
that's-
294 and the Chapter 505. It was used previously in the 80s, and I can't attest if Warren had I don't think back then they did not have the bylaw. Yeah, I don't think they had the bylaw. All they had was the state version back then.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
why it has never been used, because we never ratified it.
Well, also the state was probably the only entity, I'm just starting to realize that, was the only entity at the time, because there was no bylaw until like I think the 90s. No, 76, my bad. So it was just, in fact, there was a bylaw at that time. Correct, there was a bylaw.
It's like we ought to just
So
ratify
we
it.
come around to it, it exists, it can be used.
Right, yeah.
It's more of a question of when should it be used?
Yeah, that's my,
Right,
I
yeah,
don't,
right.
I'm not totally
That's
clear
right.
on.
You're not gonna make a resource area go away.
Right.
but
Right.
It's there.
That's what I was saying, who,
You know, I think
brings
we have
us
to go
forward.
into the examples bill, which would be this 52 Jackson.
That's how this whole discussion
Yeah, exactly.
bubbled up to the surface and the form came
Right.
to the
Got it.
attention of the commission. But the action that you're taking now would be just to adopt the form for Marshfield so you can use it if the situation arises where you want it.
sounds like we should do that.
Jackson
So,
is the
yeah.
next
Should,
discussion.
That's
It makes sense.
straightforward. It's just another,
This is
tool
another
in
tool
the,
The toolbox,
Yeah.
yeah.
and we may never use it, we may need it, so I think, I move that we ratify WPA Form 6, notification of non-significance, to be used by the municipality of Marshfield.
Correct. And what we'll do is, based on our prior meetings, we will carry it out. We'll make sure that the bylaws on there and the regulations are on there, and we'll have two forms. We'll have one that'll be a state and one that'll be a town, because I believe, but I'm not certain, you would need to record both,
Okay,
I believe.
Well, as the discussion goes on, I mean, this is almost a de minimis activity. So does this require filing an NOI?
This does, yeah. This form does.
That form you can use after an NOI has been filed. And for you to use this form, you have to be reacting to an NOI.
So
that
this,
has been filed.
just further to Bill's point, here, the state recognizes this. This is a document they provide. The de minimis is something the town provides.
Okay, well, I think we can go ahead and vote that we could use this form, but then I want to continue the discussion about.
Yep. I'm not,
we will,
Yeah.
trust me, that's
what's
coming,
next on the
yes.
agenda.
So, okay, motion on the table to ratify, use of WPA Form 6, notification of non-significance by the town of Marshfield.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now we come to where the rubber meets the road on 52 Jackson Street, which we've had before us. It has been deemed substantial by Mr. Stewart, based entirely on interior work. From a floodplain point of view, it's good to go if smart vents are put in the foundation. And I see Andrew is here, so why don't we let him share what he thinks is the optimum way to approach these projects.
Could I make a suggestion before you do that? You may want to, in this discussion that's about to come up, discuss 52 Jackson and 226 Bay Avenue together. And I would be cautious about it in terms of, you have a request from the applicant to reopen the public hearing. I mean, the order of conditions, public hearing for the order of conditions on Bay Avenue. And I would think that you want to be cautious about how you're discussing that issue before you reopen the hearing on the order of conditions. So I think if we keep things philosophical about this time and discuss possibly both situations generically, without being specific, it might be better. Because I think one of the problems that I see is that I'm not sure the issue has been framed properly for the commission to consider. All of the options that might be available, including the use of the Form 6 or some of the suggestions that the building commissioner was gonna make, he would like you to consider. I think for the benefit of the commission, these all have to be framed properly and presented to the commission in writing for your consideration prior to any public hearings or any actions that you might take, so that you have an option you have the opportunity to consider your options, and not just have them presented to you at a public hearing without any background or framing properly. So I just throw that out to you now, because I think it would be a good idea if you kept things generic in terms of the discussion right now. And the building commissioner can weigh in. I think, again, I would just like to, might be a good idea to keep things generic. And then later, you have a request on Bay Avenue to reopen the public hearing, which then you could get specific about doing that if you wanted to do it.
Madam Chair?
Sure.
I would think it's better for us to separate this entirely from any particular product and consider the form and its use and why we might use it separate from any specific example. I worry about how this discussion could impact the Bay Ave project and how that Bay Ave project could be impacted when it gets reviewed by DEP. Because we've already stuck our noses into it, if you will. And what happens if we do this and that, and how does that get received by DEP? So I'd like to keep them clearly separate so that we don't have to worry about that discussion. And I think with the Jackson, taking Bill's proposal another step is isolate that as well from a hypothetical example. I'm not adverse to using examples that may be almost identical to potential cases that we have coming, but I think it should be separate.
I was going to say the same thing. I was going to say separate silos, and then you just took step one. You just ratified the form in the new and everything so on. Now you got an example. This one's a little bit more straightforward. I've had a chat with Andrew about the two differences in the projects, what stages they're in, and learn how to use it on the first one. And if there's, philosophical components of something else that are worthwhile, that's okay. But you're going to focus on the one project, so you're in a separate silo. And I think that's the way you typically do things. We wouldn't do Form 5s and think about multiple projects,
Okay, so hypothetically speaking, say we have a case where a project is deemed substantial based entirely on non-jurisdictional to the Conservation Commission issues, i.e. interior work
I think Andrew's trying to help out here.
only. So, one option may be an NOI followed by the potential use of Form 6. Another option would be an NOI where our orders of conditions address the lack of impact to the resource area, and in fact, the detrimental impact to the resource area if we carried it to the logical conclusion and insisted the house be raised on piers with no footing.
I think I think that the building commissioner has some options or actions that you might want to take and not use the Form 6.
Exactly,
I
that's,
don't know if he's still there.
He's trying to get us, but I think
and that's the point I'm making. He makes, I'll let.
What I'm saying is that I
There
think
we go.
we need to frame this properly for the commission. I think we need to frame it in writing and present it to you before we have public hearings.
okay, so time out, Andrew. Andrew's trying to talk. He's struggling. One of the green things around him, but it's not coming through, and I don't know why. Andrew, we want to get you. A little better, but we got it, I'm not sure why, but it's not great. Bear with us, Andrew, you got the floor, it's all right.
It's not hooked to the speakers.
Okay.
It's not you, Andrew.
It's not you, it's coming in another portal here. Sorry, I didn't mean to be interrupting,
No,
we're trying to
that's okay. We
facilitate, you
wanna-
wanted Andrew here, you wanted
Want to
Bill
be
here.
able to hear 'em.
Everybody, we're part of the four of us, you know what I mean?
Explains the RDA issue.
Andrew, testing, 1, 2, 3.
Can't use an RDA, it's a resource.
It's coming out of the laptop, not out of your speakers.
This whole thing is sort of, if it's
On the hearing chambers, he says turn the, okay.
impact on it. Because I don't remember you had to things.
Getting all this, Joe?
Basis.
Try again, Andrew.
Okay. Yeah, right on. We got it.
All right, now you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Okay, hang on a minute. So I can put the headphones in. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, very good. Thank you. All right, so frame this hypothetically. Hypothetically speaking, we have an existing house that is in a barrier beach environment, but it's in an A zone, which, so let's just establish that. So we have an A zone, special flood hazard area, but it's been delineated as a coastal beach, or a coastal dune and a barrier beach, right? So there's two sets of standards there that you have to meet, right? You've got the flood zone standards for the A zone, but then you also have flood zone standards for a coastal dune. Now these are all based off of the building code. And essentially, what the building code is anytime there is a substantial improvement, and what a substantial improvement is any proposed construction in a flood zone where the cost of the work is a 50% or more of the market value of the structure, and that's the structure alone. And they can determine that market value either through the town's assessed value or through a private assessment of the depreciated cost of improvements. But if the cost of that proposed work is more than 50% of the value of the structure, then that's what determines a substantial improvement. So once you're determined a substantial improvement, a couple of things have to happen. You have to come into full compliance with the flood zone for the foundation and anything having to do with flood zone requirements in the building code for that zone. So the difficult thing in some of these situations is when we're dealing with a barrier beach, a developed barrier beach, is that we have pre-existing houses, we have previously altered areas, we have diminished function, we got a lot of asphalt, we've got all this stuff. We have a lot of houses that are non-compliant. So I'll phrase the hypothetical then this way. So we have a house that is in AE zone. It's in a barrier beach. It's got a cinder block foundation and a depressed crawl space. So it's a little bit below grade, maybe 18 inches below grade. And however, the house is elevated above the height required by building code and by FEMA. So we've got a situation where you've got a pre-existing house in a previously altered area with diminished function. You've got an existing foundation where the house is elevated, is compliant with the elevation requirements. And the only thing that would need, that foundation would need to do to bring it into full compliance with the flood zone is to put in 4 smart vents into the foundation, to the existing foundation, and to raise the grade, that depression in the grade, so that it's even with the outside grade, even or above the outside grade. And if they did that, they'd be in full compliance with the building code and with FEMA. The trick is, it's a barrier beach. and a substantial improvement. And so coastal dune standards are supposed to apply. So now what would happen is that house, which has been deemed a substantial improvement, even though it's all interior work and had no proposed exterior work, it's a substantial improvement, has to be brought into full compliance. It could very easily be brought into full compliance with the flood zone, but in order to be brought into full compliance with the coastal dune, the house has to now be moved off of the foundation to a different location. The existing cinder block foundation has to be completely excavated, disturbing beyond the footprint of the current house into undisturbed soil. Excavate out that whole foundation and footings, regrade the entire site, and drive new piles, and move the house back from the other location where it was, and reset it on the new foundation. What I propose is that in situations like this, where you have a house that is located in an area that's, where it's pre-existing, it's diminished function, altered area, I feel like to bring it into compliance, where you take out that cinder block foundation, or you take out some other sort of foundation, move the house, not only are you putting on an enormous financial burden on the applicant, where they had not been expecting something like that, or you're also, now you're also going to be disturbing the area more than what it would be. And so when you think of the function of the floodplain and the functions that are important to the WPA for these areas, right? It's storm damage prevention and flood control. So really, when we're talking about the flood zone of an AE, putting in those smart vents and raising the grade are going to increase the function of storm damage prevention and flood control for that area. And part of the performance standards that the DEP gives us for a barrier beach is that no project can be permitted that will diminish the functions, right? But there should always be room for improve the functions. So that's why I feel like amending an order of conditions or issuing an order of conditions that allows the project to be compliant with that flood zone, so that it addresses the functions that the WPA is concerned about for these resource areas, but yet doesn't necessarily trigger full compliance for coastal dune. And if you go back to the matrix, the building matrix, the problem with the building matrix is that it's two code cycles back, and all the numbers have changed and a couple other things changed. But if you go back to that matrix, which the DEP still puts out there, if you look all the way over, it has a thing that says that A zone and in a coastal dune. If you go all the way to the end and it says other substantial improvement, which would mean interior work, it says that all it has to do is meet with the elevation requirements. It doesn't have to meet with the open pilings. So that's something to consider too, is that it actually is in the matrix. However, in the building code standards, the matrix doesn't really kind of apply anymore, because it's kind of two code cycles back from 2008. And we've had a couple of revisions since then. All the code numbers are different, and some of the code articles have changed in fact as well. So I think it would be difficult, just as Art pointed out earlier, to say that that the area is not significant, right? Because it is. The resource area is significant. And because I'm determining these things to be a substantial improvement, it's forcing a foundation change. It's forcing activity. Unless the Conservation Commission can issue me an order of conditions or some other document that will allow the construction that you are conditioning. So you could condition and say, we feel that this would be a greater disturbance, this alteration would be a greater disturbance to the resource area if we were to have to excavate the thing, where we can meet the standards of FEMA and the flood zone and increase the functions of this property. as it applies to storm damage prevention and flood control by making some small adjustments. You put a couple of smart vents in and you add some fill, in the situation I was describing. There are a lot of situations like this all over town, and I think that was something that Joe brought up at the last meeting, was like, how often are we going to be seeing this? And I see it all the time. It's a lot. And I just feel like we have to have some method of addressing some of these situations where it clearly, in my opinion, would actually cause more detrimental effect to the actual ground and cause the potential for more erosion and scour. So if you were to excavate out an existing foundation and replace it with clean fill and then drive piles, that first couple of feet that would have been excavated, now that stuff's loose soil and we have a big storm event, that stuff could get washed right out. Whereas if it was still the cement block foundation, we've now protected that foundation with the smart vents. We're allowing for the water to have free flowing movement in and out. We aren't disturbing any of the soil around, and we're bringing the fill grade up so that it will not, cause any damage to the foundation, the existing foundation. This is where I'm coming from on it, and I just wanted to put that out to you guys and kind of hear what you had to think, and I'm happy to answer any questions or give some more examples or anything like that if you'd like.
Yeah, Andrew, so thank you for that framing. So this hypothetical house is already elevated high enough that it doesn't have to be raised anymore?
Correct.
What would happen if the house wasn't high enough, this hypothetical house?
Well, it would have to be elevated. So once that would have to happen. It would have to get elevated. So now we have to determine how that gets elevated. So I think that's where it would be a different type of a conversation, because you're saying, well, it has to get elevated. How are we going to achieve that elevation? Sorry. Hang on, I'm sorry.
I'm guessing German Shepherd.
Yes, German Shepherd.
Is that?
Wow, no, you don't.
Not just dumb commissioners out here. We also are up to speed on our wildlife.
So that would be the thing, because if it's not elevated, I agree, that's a different situation, because now you do have to elevate it. And so a cement block foundation that doesn't meet the height, you're not just going to add cement blocks to it. You're going to have to address that situation, and that might be a better situation for, doing a different type of foundation, an open pile foundation with no footings or something, and trying to make that happen. If they're going to be elevating the structure and moving it potentially anyway, because of that elevation, that's why I think it's a little bit different in this situation where we have houses that are elevated and they already meet that requirement, and to meet the rest of the requirement would cause more disturbance to the resource area than I think we really want to see.
I agree. I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
does.
Andrew, may I ask another twist of the hypothetical? What happens
Absolutely.
if Rick's house was, let's say 6 inches below the elevation requirement, and it was the same house that you described? Would it be reasonable to consider raising it up on that concrete block foundation, putting another course in, putting it back down on that, rather than moving the house, digging up and repile driving, in your view? Because I think part of our job is to take a look at the total impact on the environment and the resource areas.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so in a situation, we actually did have a situation like this not too long ago, where the applicant basically he was going to trigger a substantial improvement, and he was 6 inches underneath the flood zone. 'Cause he went out and got an elevation certificate to have it determined exactly, and he was literally 6 inches underneath the elevation to require. So what he did, he just decided to not pursue the project, and instead change what he was going to do. So that one probably would have just had to. Now that wasn't in any. That wasn't a buffer zone to a salt marsh. That wasn't in any coastal dune area. It was a different. It's just the land subject to coastal storm flowage, but. Still, it would have required him to elevate, and then my suggestion to him was just get like a 6x6 pressure treated timbers, and much like you would on a timber pile foundation, and just line the foundation with that to get the elevation requirement. But that, again, this was a house that's one of these small cottages. They were really only looking to do interior work, remodel a kitchen, remodel a bathroom, remodel a bedroom, and because of the cost of the house, it triggered the substantial improvement. So instead of, they weren't looking to spend the money to elevate the house and have to disconnect services and reconnect them and all that other stuff. They were just looking to do a couple of simple remodels. And I think what they're going to try to do is just, do one remodel this year, wait a while and do the next, or just do one kitchen and then do the bathroom, and not try to do a big whole project all at once.
Yeah, we're well aware of staging, but going back to your first example, it would be maintaining the same footprint, and it already meets the elevation requirement. That would be the circumstances when you would that you're using as an example now.
Correct.
All the work is within the existing structure of the house.
Correct.
So that example you used, Joe, was 6 inches below. So let's say we're in Barrier Beach coastal dune, right? And we're in a flood zone also. Isn't that going to trigger the open pile foundation? So that's we got a whole continuum of situations that are going to come up, some which are easier than others, and I think we need to start figuring that out. And the other thing is that this component of substantial is vital, and just like we have a relationship with the harbor master, we have a relationship with the building commissioner. We need to know when substantial's kicking in before it comes to us, so that we have a position early on, okay, you're going to need to go up on piles or not. This is going to be something that we condition because we've seen this before. This can be a Form 6. We know it's coming, so that we have a continuum of pathways to solve the various types of projects will be coming forward. So it's starting to take shape is what I'm seeing.
Can I ask?
It seems like the Form 5 could have a lot of value. The Form 6 will have its place also, but it might be rare and unusual. That's what I'm starting to sense.
Yeah, to Andrew's point, I think he's making the case that it would be rare and unusual because these improvements are not insignificant. It's, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to ask a quick question to Andrew. Just based on the way you were phrasing it before, were you referring to using a Form 6, or were you referring to conditioning not going up on pilings in a Form 5 in an order of conditions?
I think it would, personally, I think it would probably be best to use the order of conditions, because I feel that based on what you were reading too, Eric, earlier about the Form 6, it just seemed like it's almost like the Form 6 is to say, well, the state has determined this to be resource area, and we've looked at it and are saying that it's not significant, and it's not almost like it's not a resource area. All this, everything I've read from the DEP, and the coastal manual and all the stuff that they put out in the 80s and 90s about barrier beaches and barrier beach management, it all says that, barrier beaches are per se significant to those functions of storm damage control and flood prevention. And I think that that's where the condition has to lie, right? Because you're going to meet those functions, and you're going to improve those functions with your order of conditions. And that's the thing in the building code is when I have a substantial improvement, I need one of 4 documents. And a good reason to ratify the WPA 6 is because that is one of the 4 documents that I can be issued that will allow the construction. And one of those 4 documents is necessary if it's a substantial improvement, even if it's all interior work and there was no potential at first. They didn't want to do any kind of disturbance outside. There wasn't going to be any added decks. There wasn't going to be anything. And it was all interior work. But if that interior work triggers a substantial improvement, I then have to give it to Concom, and they have to give me one of those 4 documents. And if I don't get one of those 4 documents, I can't issue a building permit. And so that's why, we're coming up upon this scenario where, is it responsible for us to, put this, an added burden on an applicant that's just wanted to do interior work on their house when we can meet the functions, when we can, improve the functions on that lot, we can meet the functions, the standard of those functions for that flood zone in an AE zone or an AO zone, and not have to kind of go to the next level with the open pilings with no footings in a previous altered area with diminished function. And this is all stuff that I've been gleaning from the coastal manual and elsewhere.
I guess my point, if I may, is this is a lot of information to try and digest in an open meeting just like this. I think it should be framed in terms of written down, and I think some justification, some resource references to information that's available that you can use as a reference to justify your decisions should be put forward to you. Andrew's discussion just now, I think, should be put in writing, and it should be presented to you and give you an option, give you the opportunity, I should say, to consider it before you have a meeting, before you have an open public hearing. So you can think about what you want to do. It's difficult to absorb all of this just sitting here listening to it. So what I'm suggesting is that between now and the time you take any actions on a public hearing or a revised order of conditions or use of a Form 6, that we present you with this information in writing so you can consider it before you go into those hearings. And that's what I would like to see happen.
If I may, Bill, I like your proposal. I think I would like to clarify it as 2 pieces. One is to help us understand the value of a Form 6 and where it sits in. But
yes, I agree.
Individually, I would say for myself, there have been a number of projects that have come before us in the last year that have given me some heartache, because I'm looking at the project saying the rules that we have to deal with would wind up more negative to the environment than an alternative. And there's got to be some ways for us to understand how we can do right by the environment and the rules, and also respect the homeowner and the environment. It doesn't make sense in the example that we were talking about to dig up everything, and it also doesn't make sense for the homeowner.
That's right.
And we struggled on those. We need to understand how to do the right thing.
That's right. And I think, as I say, it's good to have a discussion like this, but I think it's better as a supplement to this discussion, is to have this information put down in writing, separate, how does the Form 6 fit in? How does Andrew's suggestion fit in? Where do you use this, where do you use that? And,
Are there other options?
yeah,
So-
what other options might be available? And I think if you have that information, then you can make a better informed decision. And at least I think if it's challenged by DEP, at least you've had some good solid basis to make, that you made your decision based on. And let them straighten it out.
That helps me deal with some of the projects that we may have done in recent time, and we, through this process, may want to reconsider. I would have concerns over doing that reconsideration without something like this process.
Yeah.
It gives us some stability, and it gives the advocate for the project some confidence that maybe it won't get shot down when it goes to DEP.
So there's some building blocks too. It's, you have to have an NOI. We know that for either the 6 or the 5. We know how to use a 5. Now there's some different species that are coming up, because I was thinking the same thing. So is Eric, about conditioning our way through, because Eric and Andrew and I were wanting to know, what would DEP think about this? How would we use it properly so that we could properly advise the full commission with that important information? And so I think that Bill's hitting on something here, but one of the components, as well as the NOI, is getting that substantial determination early in the game. It's in our checklist, actually. We moved it in because that's such a vital component of this. I mean, the two...
Can I chime in on that, Bill?
Yeah, just a second. The two just overlap so importantly that it's, in my opinion, it's critical of it early. Go ahead, Andrew.
So we're having that department head meeting on Thursday about the floodplain permit, and that'll be the final presentation. So the floodplain permit, what that's going to do is basically any activity in the flood zone, they're going to apply through that first, and that will direct them then to go to Concom, or that will direct them to go to the ZBA or to the building department and get those determinations, so that we'll be working truly concurrently on the permitting, and we'll be able to get those substantial improvement determinations early on in the process.
Good.
And work together throughout the whole entire thing, instead of going to one board, then going to another board, then coming to the building department, and then getting a determination and getting sent all the way back again. So
Russian.
I think that will be taken care of next week.
That's refreshing, and that's what the commission's needed for a while, and we're getting there. It's taken a little while, but we're going to get there. That's great.
Well, I think for myself, the big question is, when would Form 6 become appropriate?
Well, I think that can be addressed, but I believe it should be done in writing right now. I mean, I think that's my suggestion, is that we put this down in writing as suggestions and some guidance or direction, whatever you want to call it, on how these various scenarios can be addressed.
Okay, makes total sense.
Well, we've ratified the Form 6.
Right.
So that's,
Right, that's the first step.
right.
And I think Andrew has some obviously good suggestions, but I think we need to put it down in writing.
So we've always treated it as black and white, now we want to create a gray. Is that-
Right, that's right.
And have it clear enough so that, the applicants can come in with the expectation as to what they need to propose, correct?
Yeah, I think that's, black and white is not, one size does not fit all by any means.
This gives us some good criteria to evaluate those
That's right.
marginal projects on.
That's right. I mean, we've said many, many times, a lot of things are on a case-by-case basis, and that,
This is definitely,
it's just,
yeah.
it's the nature of what we deal with.
So, with regard to specifics, if at 52 Jackson Street, I think you should get an NOI.
We definitely need an NOI.
And then on 226 Bay Avenue.
We're not done with 52, so, yeah,
no,
we're not
I'm
done
just-
with it, though.
I know.
I was gonna ask a question of Eric. So in that handbook, right, can we just tell the commission what the handbook says about the 6 so that you get a handle on it if it becomes a 6, just so you have the upfront?
Can you pop it up on the screen so we can see it?
Yeah, I actually can't because I don't have it on this computer, but I can read it through again. I just
Yeah,
jotted
cool.
down the notes from before. It is what I read earlier, but if we want to hear it again, I can do it again. It says, in some cases, the work proposed will not affect the interest of the Wetlands Protection Act. This is very rare and most often occurs when work is proposed in locations that do not meet the regulatory definition of a resource area, an applicant files by mistake, or a project is modified in a way that removes it from conservation jurisdiction.
So like 3 scenarios.
That's pretty narrow,
Was.
yeah.
Basically, it says the NOI was a mistake.
Or that,
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, it's saying that there's no interest protected,
Right.
that are
Right.
being
Right.
protected by doing it.
Filing the NOI was a mistake, trying to make it really simple.
So
I
earlier in
think
the
one
pro-
option that, you could consider, and again, I think Bill's point about getting all these in writing would be a good idea, to evaluate them on a option-by-option basis before deciding on anything. But one of the documents Andrew can use to proceed with work on his side is a determination of applicability. So if we're looking at a project that is limited to interior work and then maybe bringing something up to grade beneath the house, I think you could look at that as a potential RDA and consider the issuance of a -2 for work within a resource area. That way you're not saying anything is being, you're not undelineating anything as coastal dune, you're not denying any impacts, you're strictly stating that the work would not be causing an alteration to the resource area. So that's maybe another option that should be considered when we're putting together this.
That's the kind of thing we need to put down. That's what we need to do. We need to give you some options in writing and.
Yeah, I was just, yeah.
So Eric and I talked about that too, and I was wanting to explore that more with the commission, because that too exists, right? The danger of the 2 we saw at 56 Cove, the stairs with the impervious, with the plants, and then that's per se significant because a neighbor complains. So there is that danger, but they can then go and appeal if they want to, or they can file a complaint if they want to. I mean, if they just by talking to the DEP, that's not really a true complaint. It's an actual physical process. You send in a form, et cetera, and they didn't do that. So the commission has exercised the RDA all over Bluefish Cove recently. So, something like this, based on that, seems like a fit. I mean, it's interior work that triggers secondary or ancillary work that's required to bring it into conformance with building and flood requirements, all right? It's not the primary work. The people didn't want to go and fill the property. They didn't want to put the vents in, but they had to because they were substantial. So it's sort of an ancillary secondary, which is almost de minimis. I mean, we gave de minimis, or the commission gave de minimis for the fill at 226 Bay Avenue, but we conditioned it to be clean fill, which is something to consider going forward, because you have an opportunity to get a betterment also, So like if there's concrete under it and it won't destabilize it, then we take a slab out. So you can get more even with an RDA.
So with respect to 52 Jackson Street, which we have in front of us right now, are we prepared to make a determination as to what we need there, an NOI or an RDA? Or do we need,
I'm not.
you ready?
No, I am not.
No, you're not.
I am
Okay,
not.
you would like time to,
I would like to see Bill's proposal to us so that we come up with something that the homeowner can actually use and is less likely to get challenged, and helps us do the right thing for the environment.
Going forward, we'll have
Going
a
forward
tool
and for
and
these-
some experience.
These projects we've seen in recent memory.
I agree. Everybody good with waiting for
Well,
more guidance?
there's people waiting to try and get their work done.
Yeah.
How long do you think, Bill, to?
Yeah.
Well, my feeling was that if you decide on 226 Bay Avenue that you're going to reopen that hearing. The applicant has requested that you do so, and he's requested February 18th as a date to
First.
reopen it.
February 18th?
First.
February.
First hearing of February 1st.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
February 18th, I thought he said.
He has to apply by January 18th. It's 2 weeks prior to the 1st February, which is February 1st. And then in your emails that you've got here, you see February 8th. That's because I was reading to him over the phone under compressed time frame. And so I think either he caught it or I said February 8th. It's a clerical error. I'll take responsibility for it. He's asking for February 1st. Done.
I do have that email right here that he is
Yeah,
asking for the
so I'm
first.
taking responsibility for the little typo.
We do have an email from the applicant at 226 Bay requesting the February 1st hearing.
Okay, February 1st.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a little quick as far as I'm concerned. I was thinking the February 18th, this was what I read, and it was obviously a typo. February 18th date gives us time to put this together. I think February 1st is pushing it.
Well, we sort of discussed it, the applicant and I. Andy was present in the room, but I was having the call. And I told him the earliest we could do this, and he's been waiting, would be to get him on for the 1st, okay? And the commission is, had a task force and with Andrew, and we were trying to help him out. We don't know what form it's coming out, but we're trying to help him out. We'll help anybody out. And so, to the extent we can be compressed and have an answer by the 18th, this could come up as a business session item on this process that Joe's asking for. And then he could be filing on the 18th, and a request for amended order of conditions, which gives him degrees of freedom for minor activities. And it's going to be minor activities, as per 85-4 Mass DEP policy. So, if these are minor activities like we're seeing in Jackson here, then he'd be a candidate for a request for amended order of conditions, and he'd get a requested order of conditions. But we're going to have to get a little help from town council, because the last hearing, we didn't have this much degree of conversation with the building commissioner and this open communication with this whole commission and Bill Finn and everybody. So we've really advanced the process, even though it may not seem like it's happening.
What would be wrong with having Bill do the write-ups like he's proposing, because I think that would clearly be helpful.
definitely.
But in the case of Jackson, why couldn't we simply move it forward, amended order of conditions, have it meet the flood standards, put the smart fence in, and bring the fill in under the foundation to bring it up to grade?
That's not Jackson.
Jackson has not filed an
Yeah.
NOI
Oh, they
or an
haven't.
That's
RDA.
not
We don't have
Yeah.
orders of conditions on that one.
We don't.
Nothing's happened there
That's
yet.
Bay?
That's bad.
That's big.
Okay.
You could tell Sullivan now or 226 Bay that they can file a request for amended order of conditions, because personally, based on this conversation, I don't see the 6 working on that property. It doesn't fit the criteria that we just heard about. And we don't actually, he hasn't heard from DEP yet, so I'm sure Andrew, Eric, and I will feel a lot better when that happens. So anyways, long story
I'd like
short.
to make, I'm sorry, Bill. Go ahead, finish up then.
No, you go ahead, Bert.
I remember this vaguely when we were working on the 505s, is town council spoke about variances, that, we always consider variances rare and unusual.
Correct.
He says variances could also be considered not necessarily rare and unusual, but if they meet certain criteria. Do you remember anything about that, Bill? Either Bill?
I vaguely.
So,
They would have to meet certain criteria.
So if you're discussing this with town council anyway, you may want to ask about that. That could be another way to move some of these forward if we had a,
You issued a variance.
issue a variance, but have it within our policies and procedures, what specific circumstances would
What the
bring this about.
criteria would have to, what criteria would have to be met to it.
Yeah, other than rare and unusual, because from what Andrew says, these cases are not rare and unusual, we're gonna see them more and more.
Could I,
So-
could I note something quickly, just
Yeah.
from the 505 regulations? If we're looking at the section on variances, it does say in section C, a variance may be granted only for the following reasons and upon the following conditions. Number one, the commission may grant a variance from these regulations upon a clear and convincing showing by the applicant that any proposed work or its natural and consequential impacts and effects will not have any significant adverse or cumulative adverse impact on any of the wetland values and interests protected in the bylaw. I think that based on the discussion we've been having about not excavating foundations and starting over and regrading sites, that could potentially be an avenue the commission could use that's already in the regulations to justify issuing variances in these type of cases.
Another way of looking at it is that could be opening up a can of worms also. The commission has always had rare and unusual circumstance, Barrier Beach Coastal Dunes Resource Area. And I just heard, and I spoke to CZM about it, I know Andrew did, when we had 226 Bay Avenue, and was basically told that we can't provide a variance in this environment. It would have to go through the DEP. It is in the minutes that everybody approved here. Okay, there's no question about that having been stated. So I worry that the commission will be stepping into an area of expanding variances when we all wanted to close that down. I don't think variance is the best option in Barrier Beach Coastal Dune. I think the tools you're looking at are the Form 2, the Form 6 rarely, and some kind of options within the Form 5. The commission needs to know early on what kind of substantial we're dealing with. Is this exactly like 52, which is pretty light-handed? Or is this more complicated, you know what I mean? So I think we need that write-up from Bill that he's been talking about, how we can get all that. Timing-wise, if we could have it by the 18th of January, at least in a draft form, then we would have at least the beginnings of that. And that would give us another hearing before even Sullivan had to come up with regards to his hearing on the 1st. We may have a great advancement, in 30 days, in other words.
Bill, did you say it was possible by January 18th to have a draft, or were you talking February?
Sullivan wants to talk.
Yeah, he wants
Well,
to talk.
first of all, let me make it clear, I'm not the only author here. I'm looking for input from the building commissioner and his position and the issue that he just explained. And I'm looking for input from you, and if you're not gonna be here, I guess can't have you.
That makes it more complicated.
Can you get done with the 14th? There you go, chop chop.
Get all you can out of him before he
That's
goes.
right. Get moving.
Talk at me.
All sources, so, just to make, I'm not the primary author only. I'm more than willing to pull it all together, and add my thoughts as well, but, I don't want to, so you're asking me if I can do something, I'm gonna need input from everybody else to answer your question.
I've got to ask a question of somebody, and I picked you because you were an advocate. I think your description makes it more complicated to do in 2 weeks, 10 days.
Yeah.
But I was asking the question for argument's sake because I believe it was offered as a date. I think
It
it's
was.
impossible.
I'm trying to
By
keep,
someone else.
so the someone else would be me, and I'm trying to keep in sequence with these other two properties at the same time, because I think that some of the outcomes of this momentum or initiative might flow into Jackson, it might flow into Sullivan. I think Sullivan's only option right now, and we haven't talked about that, would be the request for amended order of conditions. And he should probably step forward on that. I don't know what the outcome is, that's the problem. I just can't, and I told him that. And he wants to talk, by the way. His hand is up, so.
Okay, well, with respect to item B5, 52 Jackson Street, I think we're in agreement that we want to hear more from whatever position paper Bill is going to come up with the best way to move forward on this. Is that correct? So then we're going to move to item B6. 226 Bay Avenue, and the request for reopening the hearing for amended orders of conditions.
Craig.
And Mr. Sullivan is there and would like to speak.
Craig, should we make a motion to table the last one?
Oh, okay.
It's just a cover.
I am going to move that we table further discussion of 52 Jackson Street, a review of minor non-significant activities until,
It's the 18th.
until the January 18th, 2022 meeting. May I have a second?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's good, all right.
Now, item B6, and Mr. Sullivan is here and would like to speak. Go ahead, Mr. Sullivan?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, welcome, Mr. Sullivan, how are you doing?
I'm okay. So I guess I'm having some video trouble, but it's probably for everyone's benefit. I'm not sure what to say. My hand was not raised to speak. I've been listening, and I was listening to the last meeting as well 2 weeks ago. As a reminder for you all who may not know, I got the order of conditions unanimously approved back in, it was either May or June, and then was directed back to this board in the middle of November as a result of exactly the issues that you're discussing tonight, because the project was deemed to be a substantial improvement. There is no work in my case that's outside the existing footprint of the house. We're enclosing an existing porch into, or proposing to enclose an existing porch into interior living space, and all of the other improvements are interior. The cost of the improvements, just like the other case you guys were talking about, is in excess of 50% of the current value of the house, and if we pursue the whole project. And I came back before the board in November and essentially made the case and requested some relief from this standard, which at that time was not granted. I did offer at Andrew's and Bill's requirement that we fill in the underside area of the house to bring it to grade. We need about 39 or so yards of fill under the house to improve the existing floodplain function. What's not clear to me in this process, and what's surprising here, is I submitted a request this afternoon. Two things, just back up. One, I had no idea that last week my house my project was being discussed by this commission in the last meeting. I only heard about that the day of from Andrew. I also did not know that I was being asked to submit anything in advance of this hearing by way of a request to reopen the hearing. Specifically, I needed to actually submit something until this afternoon around 4 o'clock or 3:30 or whatever the time was. So I do appreciate the efforts of everyone involved to try to move this process forward. Clearly, for someone like me who's an interested party in the result, it would be helpful if there were a process in place that made sure that we were aware when our projects were being discussed. And that may be on me to have to follow up more frequently, but I was not in any way notified that I was going to be on the last hearing, and I found out today that I was. So I'm not prepared to speak other than to say I was hoping, after what I heard in the December hearing, that what I would have learned today was that there was a process going forward that everyone seemed willing to consider, whether that be Form 6 or an amended order of conditions. I understand the need to understand clearly what the ramifications and implications of either of those options are. But I am not particularly optimistic that if we're pulling together information from 3 or 4 or 5 different sources, we can have these intellectual discussions, but just to be clear, my project I'm trying to do interior improvements to my mother's house to get it ready for her, she's going to be almost 80 years old. She's 79 years old, for her to move in this summer. The project was supposed to start on October 1st. We were approved by ZBA in May and by Concom in June. I'm now going to be 5 months behind schedule while we have these conversations, and already, even if in the best case scenario, I get an amended order of conditions that says, you're free to go, you can do whatever you want to do, build whatever you want. We've deemed that the interior improvements, or however it works out, are not substantial, and that the measures being taken and covered by the existing order of conditions are sufficient to protect the resource areas. I already can't do the project that we're proposing to because there's just not enough time anymore. So I appreciate the difficulty of pulling these things together, but they do have real life ramifications for projects like mine that are in the pipeline. And I gather that I'm in some ways a guinea pig here to be the first one through to try to help the town with this process, but it's been really tough. And I'm no closer to starting construction today than I was, frankly, in May and June when I received unanimous approval from the ZBA and Concom to do this work. And I haven't proposed a single additional nail to be driven in this house since that time. The only additional work was additional mitigation work to fill an already elevated house to lose a subsurface garage area. So it's an improvement to the area, and I appreciate the quandary that the board is in, and we had this conversation back in November. But I would really like to impress upon you that to the extent we were able to find a path forward here, and one that works for the board, and one that is workable for homeowners, and that Andrew is on board with as well, and that everyone can get behind, I would really encourage you to please use whatever expediency we are all able to gather and muster to do so.
That was so well put. I've complimented you before, Mr. Sullivan. I just want to thank you. And yes, the process could have been better in terms of notifying you. We have 4 people here who really were pushing in the front end to try to get us to this point. I'll take responsibility for not notifying you, and I'll try to do a better job going forward. So that'll now be dubbed on me. So you'll be hearing from me, and we'll keep this going. As you heard, I was trying to dovetail the timing elements of this, and that made Mr. Finn here wince a little bit, but I know him. He will get us a good product, even if it's partial, moving us forward, and it still may dovetail with your project going forward, hopefully as early as the 1st of February, if we can get that date to go. So we are trying, and I thank you for the eloquent comments, because that is more powerful than any regulation or bylaw or any experience that we have, is hearing from people and how it affects them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I understand your frustration. I'm sorry, but yes, you are caught in a time when we are trying to streamline processes here, and it's not easy. So I'm sorry it's turned out this way for you. We will do our best to move as quickly as we can to resolve some of these issues.
Thank you. Is there anything, let me just very specifically, is there anything at all that I need to submit in advance of the next hearing, whether it be bill to satisfy your request for purposes of public notice that would allow, and by the way, I do think that whether it be an amended order of conditions or a Form 6, as you know, the notice can be broader as long as you're putting people on notice that any one of those things can happen. You can notify more broadly and then issue more narrowly at the public hearing. But putting that aside, or if there's any work that I can do to help the board or Bill or Andrew consider this issue. I am a real estate lawyer. I obviously, I have my own interests at heart here, but I am happy to advance the ball to the extent that that is helpful. This is not my specific area of expertise. I've learned a lot more about it, frankly, in the last 6 months than I ever hoped to. But if there is a way that I can facilitate, it's not clear to me what needs to happen between now and the 18th to allow the board to make the decision they need to make.
I can tell you what to do. All right, so you're going to file a request for amended order of conditions. I'm going to ask the commission right now. I don't think he needs to get another surveyed plan. We already know what it is. We know what the subsurface activities are. It's going to be dirt underneath. You've already got conditions on a de minimis that can be tied in, and You won't need to do that, but we do need a submittal for a request for amended order conditions. I think this conforms to a streamlined almost notice of intent type filing. It follows along with that. So I'll send you the package, and we'll get it out so that you can make the 18th without any issues. And Liz and I will make our time for you, as will Eric, to help you get this thing processed.
Okay, thank you. And so just to be clear though, when I am reopening, what I'm looking to do specifically is to amend my order of conditions. It's what I'm hearing.
Yep, you are. And what you're going to do is I'm going to send you...
But Bill, just a minute. To amend my order of conditions with the intent of having the board determine that the proposed, that the order of conditions approves the construction. And to Andrew's earlier point, which is what he was making when he was advocating for the position of an amended order of conditions as opposed to a Form 6, that the commission is acknowledging that it is substantial improvement, and also acknowledging that under these circumstances, it is approved because the alternative is one that is untenable. That the alternative of requiring compliance with the coastal dune building standard is more detrimental to the existing resource area. Isn't it that simple? I'm not sure. I'm not looking for a variance. I'm looking for that determination.
So that's the outcome you may want, but the outcome that you are looking for by going with the request for amended order conditions is that this is going to be a minor change. I'll send you the policy for 85-4. So I think that what's happening is this, with additional information that's come forward, particularly tonight, the commission is trying to explore where and when we have a condition that triggers a minor, but it's in Barrier Beach coastal dune, like your mother's property. And if that fits, then hopefully this would go forward. Again, this has to be given to the Mass DEP. The final product, whatever it is going to go to them. So we need to hear from them as well. And you're probably a candidate, and we'll see how that goes. But that's the outcome that we're trying to do, is to understand the work within the concept of it being minor, and not all those other components you were saying. It has to meet minor, and that's it.
I am going to move that we vote
Submit a request for amended order of conditions.
to accept the request for an amended order of conditions at 226 Bay Avenue, SE 422924, to reopen and reevaluate the orders of conditions. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, Bill will get that paperwork to you, Mr. Sullivan, and we will address it at the next hearing on the 18th.
18th, yes. The 18th, he's going to be submitting.
Submit by the 18th.
Correct. You have the dates correct. You do have the dates correct. He'll submit by the 18th, and it'll come before the commission on the first
okay.
possible option, barring any unforeseen changes. That's all I can say right now. But that seems like the pathway forward. And Bill, you've got a lot to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
But again, if there's anything that I can help to move that process along, I'm more than willing. So.
Okay.
Thank you. We will, well, Bill will be in touch with you.
Who's the second on that one?
Joe?
Joe? And then we got 6-0. Okay.
Thank you for your input, Andrew. It was very helpful. We appreciate it.
What will the board need from me? As far as anything in writing, I'd be happy to work on that first thing in the morning tomorrow and get that out to you guys as soon as I can.
I think Andrew, personally, can I speak for the commission or not?
Please.
Okay.
Well, yeah,
Because
speak.
I provide product to them, and then they can tell me what they want. You're very excellent write-up on your workbook guideline here. If we could get a letter about this property at 226, explaining the conditions that trigger both the building code and the flood requirements for the change, which would be the fill and anything else, so that we understand that. And this is seen as secondary, it's a secondary aspect, okay? It's not the primary aspect of the work. The primary aspect of the work that came before us was the addition, the changes. So we can see that separately, but all in one letter. That would be tremendously helpful, and then how it came to substantial, because then the commission has clear and convincing information that differs from where they were 6 weeks ago. And that is an important element to this, personally.
All set?
Okay, any further comments from commission? Okay. Then I think that completes our business for tonight. I move that we close the Marshfield Conservation Commission January 4th, 2022 meeting. All in favor?
No, second, sorry, you said that. You caught me. I don't know who told you that, but I gotta find out.
I've been told that, yeah, it's correct.
All right, 8:26 PM, nice, all right. Wow, that's good. Thank you, everybody. So,